Hello and welcome to the Store Central Postgame Show. This is Aman Kidwai, joined by Graham Chamberlain. The Huskies just wrapped up a 20-17 win at Buffalo. They improved to 3-2 on the season. That is the good news. An impressive late field goal drive by the Huskies with the game tied to capture the victory there. You've got to hand it to them. Graham, how are you feeling after this win?
I guess still similar to last week against Ball State. I think coming into this season, a close win at Buffalo would have been pretty good, all things considered. I think the important thing here is the context of the fact that Taquan Roberson is out, Josiah Gatings was out. This Bulls team also lost their starting center. And offensively, it was a rough go of things. Fagnano was under 100 yards for most of the game up until that last drive. And it was a great drive to get the last field goal, of course, credit where credit is due. But, our concerns have kind of been like, okay, the offense is not consistent. You get these big plays from Edwards and Bell, and those are fantastic, but otherwise it's feast or famine. And there was no feasting today, right? Buffalo did a really good job at preventing the big plays, and you saw how much difficulty UConn had. We knew Buffalo had a good defense. I think they're top 15 in tackles for loss. They're near the top of the NCAA standings, and sacks. Obviously, that's kind of opponent adjusted. Playing a couple MAC teams and an FCS team, but again, it's just like last week. It's what does the rest of this season look like? And it seems like it's kind of going to be these really back and forth, tight games, bad for your blood pressure type games. That might be just what we're in for.
Yeah, it's kind of like, what if last season did not have the Buffalo and FAU games, which were just these really confidence-building blowout wins, and you just had the Temple game or the UAB game, which did not inspire the most confidence, but, UConn was continuing to stack wins at that time. And again, had those really good wins earlier. And then I think the other piece is just like you're saying, when we evaluate the team as a whole, we still don't have a ton of confidence going forward. If we talk about last year's team again, you had multiple weapons out of the backfield. I think today we saw a little bit more of Oliver Lundberg, Coleman, and Victor Rosa and MJ Flowers, a little bit more. Cam Edwards still really carried the bulk of the load there with 15 for 62 yards. So,
but we had Joe running finally.
Yes. So that was probably the offensive highlight, which you don't love to have be the case, is that your quarterback surprises you with a lot of rushing yards. But yes, Fagnano's running did help set up a field goal drive and a touchdown, and was crucial just on a day where the offense was not moving anything. They made some plays where it mattered, but there's not a ton to be confident about in terms of you're thinking about beating some of the better teams on the schedule coming up later. And then I guess, you can say that the defensive performance is reasonably encouraging. I think the way that they, held an opponent to 17 points and did not let, besides one bad play, which you should not do, but one bad play is not as bad as multiple big bad plays, including the kind that lose you a game. So they held up enough for it to matter. It was boring, right? It was really, really boring through the scoreless first quarter and a lot of the third and fourth quarter. Really, really boring stuff. UConn had 5 3-and-outs. So that's the part where, you're up 17-10 going into the fourth quarter. You have a chance to step on it, make it a 2-score lead, and never do that. And that's kind of, the concern that you have. But you got to give him credit for absorbing that game tying touchdown and making a field goal drive with 2 third down conversions, big catches by Juice Vereen and John Nider there. But yeah, how are you feeling about the defense? Let's start there. How are you feeling about the defense after this performance?
I mean, there were still some encouraging signs. I mean, Cam Chadwick had a couple good breakups. A nice turnaround for him because he's really been struggling and really been targeted a lot the last few weeks. That's encouraging. I thought Devin Pringle played pretty well, especially in the first half at the other corner spot. After that, Diamande had, I think, 10 tackles. King had 7 tackles. Probably most concerning is no sacks. Again, I mentioned they're missing an offensive lineman. They've been able to at least get guys like Parham and Branch to the quarterback, and that didn't happen at all today. Couple pressures, but no sacks. And I just think this defense needs that. They need these kind of spark plays. And it's just not happening. And then up front, you lose Stephen Wright. Don't know if coach gave an update on him. Seemed like he might be out for a little bit. Trent Jones came back, the Iowa State transfer. So, it's good to get him back in the mix of things. But again, we're still not looking at a whole lot of pressure coming from this defense. And, I don't like to disparage people, but Buffalo's quarterback's not good. He's not good. I'm sorry. And, it's hard to really glean a lot from this kind of performance. It's like, okay, they played against a bad offense today. It is what it is. They did a really good job at holding A.J. Henderson to less than 3 yards per carry, but then you let Sperling go off and get the 63-yard run and another decent run after that. I think it only took him 9 carries to go over 100 yards. So, if there's good and there's bad, it's still better than, again, always better than the alternative. But, defensively, it's and no turnovers. Again, there was none on offense, which is fantastic. That's 5 games in a row. There was a couple close calls there, but the defense isn't forcing any either. And it's just, you're not helping yourself by not getting sacks, not getting pressure, not getting TFLs, not getting turnovers. You're just leaving yourself out on the field. And given, the way they play defense, the way they cover, like, you are going to allow yards, and it's hard to get off the field. Mm-hmm. So they're not making big plays. And I was listening to the pregame show with Bob Joyce, and they had Ben Smiley on, and he's talking about how they're bonding and still learning each other and this and that. And I'm thinking, well, it's 5 games now. September is finished, and it feels like this is probably what they're going to be. And that doesn't evoke a ton of confidence, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, it just depends where exactly your expectations were. But with Buffalo, what we thought going into it was that they had a pretty solid defense, which more or less held up. And that, like you're saying, if the offense is on its backup quarterback and backup center after an early injury in this game, and without Josiah Gathings, who also was a late scratch for this game, then you really should have kept them in check. You arguably should have had them at less than 17 points. You don't give up a long touchdown run, and you don't have those 7 points in the first. And their lives on a touchdown drive at the end to get that last one. Needed a 4th and 4 fake punt run to get their field goal. So, Buffalo was pulling out as many stops as it could. They used a string quarterback in some kind of option offense stuff just to have someone else out there, I think, just to have something different to show UConn and opposing defenses, but Buffalo doesn't have much going offensively. So yeah, I mean, I think you would have liked to see a slightly more dominant performance in the way that you're saying. And yeah, I think it's just kind of like, I don't want to say, like the Delaware game where it's just like, man, you could have made a stop there and then you wouldn't have to worry about anything. You just make one more, stop on a 3rd and long or something like that, and you wouldn't have to be there. I really thought when Buffalo scored what ended up being the game tying touchdown, I really thought they were going to go for 2, right? Why not go for the win there?
Yeah.
You got the chance, and with a minute, obviously a field goal drive can happen, but also you can lose in overtime against a more talented team potentially. So I was kind of surprised they didn't go for 2 there. That would have been a brutal way for it to end.
Yeah. Well, I also think they like their chances, and I don't blame them. I wouldn't be worried about UConn in overtime.
Maybe.
We've obviously seen 2. They're over 2, but like just the way they were playing, like, were they going to get 25 yards?
Yeah, but I mean, but you could ask the same
Multiple
question of
times?
Buffalo, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was you could call it a defensive battle. I think it was more like a punter's battle. There was some really good performances from the punters. We had a fake field goal punt by UConn there. That was
I didn't love that.
an interesting decision. Yeah, I mean, must have just felt like there was a wind situation there. What was the field goal length? It would have
It was
been
51. I mean, we've seen Freeman hit those.
So they went with the punt there because they, felt like they were stopping Buffalo. I think UConn was noticeably more conservative in its play calling throughout the game. And as it wears on and you're making a lot of stops on Buffalo, I imagine you only kind of lean into that more, much to the chagrin of people who are hoping that you can step on somebody's throat, especially when it's not that formidable of an opponent. So,
yeah, and this team might just might not be in the cards for this team to be throat stompers. It's
which is fine. We'll have some battles. It will be a battle next week when the Huskies take on FIU. We've got kickoff at 3:30 at the Rent. The Panthers are 2-2. They have defeated FAU and lost to Delaware. Notable results for them on their schedule. Got beat pretty bad by Delaware. So, and a familiar face with quarterback Keon Jenkins there. What's your early expectation for that game, Graham?
I mean, I've been nervous about it since the season started. I mean, even doing my previews before the year started, I was like, I think this game might be close. I think Willie Simmons was a really good hire for them. He's coming from Florida A&M. You mentioned they still have Jenkins, who's just terrifically athletic, and he can actually complete passes. We saw him do that a lot as a true freshman a couple years ago at the Rent. So it's going to be a big challenge for the defense, and I think offensively it's going to be important to see how Edwards is feeling. He got banged up in the first half, and I think it's going to be a long afternoon if someone other than Skylar Bell doesn't step up in the receiving game. We didn't have, Porter had some catches today. Nider had some catches, nothing crazy. Romello Murphy, I don't even think was targeted. He's their second leading receiver. So a lot of work to be done there. FIU played Penn State pretty decently from a defensive perspective. They were shut out against Penn State, but it was like 10-0 for a good while.
Okay.
So this is not a team that's inept on defense, but obviously, like you said, but that Delaware put up, I think, over 40 on them. So
38, I think. Yeah.
It's an opportunity. Every week's an opportunity. Being at home is always preferable to being on the road. So we'll see what they have in them next week, but big test.
Yeah,
which is sad to say because it's FIU, and I wish I wasn't
mean,
saying it's a big test, but it is. That's where we are.
you would have loved to see UConn, where win Ball State by a little bit more at home, and maybe just look a little bit more impressive against Buffalo, and then you could say, yeah, UConn should beat FIU. Because again, FIU, not a super impressive squad. We're showing some respect for quarterback Keon Johnson because they jumped out to a 21-0 lead on the Huskies when they were really hoping to get right in that game against FIU at home a few years back. But look, FIU is pretty down bad, and a team that UConn should be beating and be better than. But right now, we'll see, right? You cannot count on anything to be a W. It's going to be maybe similar to the Ball State game. Again, two games in a row, though, where UConn did not trail, basically leading or tied all the way in this one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's at least a little bit of something to build on, where they're starting to, again, not dominate, but assert themselves against teams that they should do that against. They're just not really doing it for that full 40, for that full 60 minutes into the fourth quarter. And, again, to go into a fourth quarter here with a lead, give it up, it's just tense moments. And that's what you'd love to avoid if you can. Though, again, shout out to Chris Freeman for that game-winning field goal, 44 yards, no gimme in this world, not even in the NFL, although kickers do seem to be getting better and better across the world. But solid effort there to get that 44-yarder through, for sure.
Yes, thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. We did not want to see overtime for the third time this season.
Nope.
On that note, we're going to wrap up the show. Thank you all for watching. You can follow us on YouTube at Store Central TV and check out our audio streams on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you for watching or listening.